Hey there! For today's quick tip, we're going to talk about finishing off your weaving wire. Now, you're often told to trim your weaving wire with your wire cutters, but we all know this doesn't work. You end up with pokey bits sticking out of your weave, you have to tuck them in, they snag on stuff. It's just not a great finish. So today I'm going to show you an almost foolproof method of finishing off your weaving wire in a way that won't leave any pokey bits, you won't have any ends to tuck in. We're going to do this on 3 different weaves so you can get a sense of how to adapt this technique to any weave that you're doing. It's a really great tip that every wire weaver should know, so let's get started. My name is Wendy and I'm the wire weaver behind Door 44. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about how to deal with the ends of your weaving wire. Now, most people will tell you to trim your weaving wire, and there's a couple of reasons I don't do this. The main reason is you just don't get a clean finish whenever you trim weaving wire with wire cutters. And depending on the type of wire cutters you have, your finish could be, more or less clean. So here I'm just going to show you what happens when I use my old wire cutters. Now, notice here the bevel that these wire cutters have. This is always going to leave a little bit of a chisel tip on the end of your wire. So if we use these wire cutters to trim our weaving wire, we're going to end up with a sharp pointy bit. I'll show you exactly what that's going to look like here. So I'm going to get in there as close to the end of that wire and I'm going to clip it off. But no matter how close I am to that wire, there's still a sharp, pointy end sticking up out of there. You see that? And that's something we definitely don't want. It's gonna be really uncomfortable for anybody who's wearing a piece of jewelry with a wire sticking out like that. It's gonna snag on clothing and hair, and it's gonna cause problems with the integrity of your weave, because if it does catch on anything, it's going to loosen your weave. So that's one reason why I don't use this. Now, people will say you can just tuck it in, and yes, you can do that, but you still have an end. Even though it doesn't feel sharp now, I just wrapped it around the core wire there with my fingernail. Even though it doesn't feel sharp, it's still going to catch on anything. See how it snags that cotton there? So we just want to avoid leaving any sort of sharp end sticking up out of our weaves. Now, even when I use my Swanstrom super flush cutters, and you can see that these cutters don't have a bevel at all, or just the tiniest hint of a bevel. So when I cut wire, and you can see I cut these wires with these cutters, and see how flat that flush cut is there? But notice there's a little ridge right in the center. So no matter how flush your flush cutters cut, you're still going to get a little bit of a ridge there. And then of course this other wire you can see was cut with the inside of these cutters, and that's why I have that chisel tip there. And if you have super flush cutters like these, you'll get a nice flat flush cut, and that doesn't have any sharp ends on it. You can't really feel it, so this isn't an end that I feel like I need to file. But notice that there's still a little bit of a ridge there, and that's just the nature of trimming wire with cutters. So I'm going to go ahead and trim. Let's do one of these middle wires with my super flush cutters. And I'll try to get in there just as flush as I can to the wire and clip that off. But I can still feel that in there. It doesn't stick up anywhere near as much as the original did, but it's still there. I can feel it. It's still going to be uncomfortable, especially if this is on a necklace or something that's, you're wearing it around pretty delicate skin or a bracelet, and it's still going to snag. If I get in there with a cotton swab, I can still catch on it, snag. See that? So that's just not an ideal situation. Now, we all know that wire has a tendency to break. We've all dealt with that in various situations, sometimes unexpectedly, so it frequently happens at an inopportune time, and it's frustrating when that happens. But we can use our wire's nature to our advantage. So wire's going to want to work harden, and it will work harden to a point where it'll break. So I always break my wires. Now the way that you do this, you want to grab your wire tail, hold it firmly, and just swirl it around in a little bit of a circle, and it'll eventually break off. Now that one, I can't feel at all. So remember where we cut the flush with the flush cutters, we had just a little bit of a snag? Now you can see that wire end down in there, but I can't feel it. Let's see if we can snag anything on it. Well, you can snag it just a little bit with these loose fibers, but that end broke down just even with the surface of this weave, which is what we want. So it feels perfectly smooth. There's no rough point there, whereas on this side where we cut with the super flush cutters, I can still feel that end, and I can even catch it on my skin. So there you go. That's why I always break my wire instead of cutting it. Now I'm going to do the same thing here, and notice here on the ends I did a couple of extra wraps. So anytime you're finishing a weave, you want to go ahead and wrap around one core wire. I usually do 3 wraps. You can do a few more, and that just, it's going to help your wire stay a little bit more secure, because you've got a tighter wrap around one single wire than you do if you're crossing over both wires like we do in this weave. So I've put 3 wraps around this bottom core wire, and now whenever I'm breaking a wire that's on a coil, I do the same thing, but I'll get in there with my thumbnail and just put some pressure. You want to press that weaving wire up against the core wire, and then again you're just going to pull it tight and swirl it around in a circle until it breaks. There we go. That wire broke cleanly, and it's down there in the weave. I can't feel it. I can't catch anything on it. Let's see here with our cotton swab if we can snag anything on it. And that doesn't even look like it's going to snag on anything. So use your wire's tendency to break, its tendency to work harden. Use that to your advantage and break your ends instead of trimming them. This is going to save you so much trouble down the road. I mean, it reduces the number of steps. You don't have to deal with getting in there with a beading awl and bending those ends down. You know, I still have that sharp bit right here. And the only way to really deal with that is to get in there with a beading awl and bend it one way or the other. Notice what that did to your weave. Now you can see your splice. Whereas before, we had a nice clean weave and it wasn't clear. It wasn't immediately apparent where that splice happened. You look on this side and you can't really see the splice at all. So that's another reason to break your wire instead of trimming it. It's just going to make your splices cleaner. It's going to make your weave look cleaner, and your jewelry is going to be much more comfortable to wear. Here's our figure 8 weave. We're going to do the exact same thing. So here on the ends where I've coiled around that top wire, I'm just going to get in there with my thumbnail, press, pull, swirl until it breaks, and we have a nice clean break. Now on this weave, because the wires cross between the 2 wires, this one actually is one of the easiest weaves to get nice clean breaks on your weaving wire tails. Because that they cross in the middle, you have leverage points already sort of built into this weave. So these wires are going to break down in the weave. You're not going to have any tails sticking up at all, and you really won't even be able to see those tails. You can kind of see the end of that one, but with the naked eye, they're going to have a really difficult time spotting any splices that you have in there. Now this end is a little short. Whenever you end your weaving wire, leave yourself 2 or 3 inches. It just makes it easier to get in there and do these breaks. Those short little pieces are kind of hard to grab onto with your fingers. But that one broke cleanly. No end poking out of there. It broke down between the 2 core wires. You can't see anything above the surface of the weave. Just the slightest little hint there, but you can't feel it at all. And then this one will go ahead and break. And this one, because it's in the middle and because there's wire pressing up against both sides of that end, again, we have a very clean break that broke down below the surface of the weave. See that? Super clean, super easy. It saves you time. It saves you headaches. And it's just kind of a neat trick. Here's one more example of, this is our 3 and 3 weave. And we have these 4 ends sticking out of here, and we're just going to go ahead and break these off as well. So again, on the ends here, we're just going to get in there with a thumbnail and press that weaving wire up against the core wire, tug on the end, swirl it around until it breaks. And let's see what we got here. That's pretty clean. I can't feel anything. But anytime you have a weave with gaps in it, it does create just a little bit more, it makes it a little more problematic to get nice clean breaks. Let's try this in the middle and see what we get. And that one broke pretty clean. I can't feel anything. You can kind of see the point down in there. You can't really see it up above the surface of the weave. There's just the slightest hint of it, but you can't feel it. It's not going to snag on anything. So that's a pretty clean break. That's much cleaner than you could achieve with even the best super flush cutters. Let's do this end again. Get in there with your thumbnail. Try to put some pressure. Press that weaving wire up against the core wire. Tug, swirl, and break. And that one broke cleanly as well. Let's do this last one. Tug, swirl, and break. And that one's also very clean. And there you go. That's how I treat wire weaving ends. So in any of my tutorials where you hear me say, or you read, if you have a PDF tutorial, I tell you to break your wire. This is what I'm talking about. I don't advise trimming your wire. I always recommend breaking it wherever you can. Now this doesn't work for all gauges of wire. This will work for up to about 24 gauge, and then anything heavier than that, you're probably going to have better luck trimming it than you will breaking it. But for 24 gauge, 26 gauge, 28 gauge, 30 gauge, this works beautifully. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's quick tip. If you did, be sure to subscribe and also hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I upload new videos. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you again next week. Until then, go make something beautiful.